If you want to follow along this morning, you can turn to the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 9, beginning in verse 7. And we're going to run through the end of the chapter this morning, covering two topics, life and time. Life and time. How much of life do you enjoy? That's a dangerous question to ask. But this morning we're going to look at something from the book of Ecclesiastes about enjoying life, and then we are going to turn to the issue of time. The book of Ecclesiastes is an interesting conversation piece. Because a lot of people know some verse out of Ecclesiastes. Many times I hear people say that their life is meaningless. Ecclesiastes. Sometimes I hear people say, well, there's a season of life. Ecclesiastes. People talk about making the most of your opportunities. Ecclesiastes. People talk about, same thing happens to everybody. Ecclesiastes. You only go around once in life, and after that, you die. Ecclesiastes. Gloom, despair, and agony on me. Ecclesiastes. If it weren't for bad luck, I'd have no luck with all. That's Ecclesiastes. If there is a God, then why doesn't He? You fill in the blank. Ecclesiastes. If I had to do it all over again, fill in the blank. Ecclesiastes. You get my drift? Ecclesiastes is as much a conversation piece and a part of reality in 2018 as it was the day that Solomon penned it. Why? Because human existence follows certain patterns and principles, no matter what the time frame, no matter what the advancement in technology or science. The realities and the realistic view of life is contained in God's Word. Therefore, Ecclesiastes is a valuable study in a day when everything that once was nailed down is now floating in midair. That is the existence of the world you live in today, and believe it or not, much of what Ecclesiastes describes is that viewpoint. That life is coming undone. And we try to find some significance and purpose in it. The last passage we dealt with, the verses from the last two verses of chapter 8 down through verse 6 of chapter 9, left us pretty well discouraged. It seemed for a while that perhaps Solomon was on an upbeat conversation with us. Then we get to the last two verses of chapter 8 and the first 6 of chapter 9, and he plunges us, as it were, off of the top of the roller coaster down the incline into reality in the valley of despair. And he makes an observation. The observation is that it doesn't matter who you are, good or bad, rich or poor, doesn't matter what circumstances come into your life, we all end up in the same place, dead. And he leaves us with that overwhelming sense of despondency. And remember, Solomon's writing looking back across his life. He's where some of you are right now, looking back and going, wow, maybe things would have been different if, or I wish I'd done that, or nothing I can do about it now. But what he's doing is he's giving us some instruction about life. And so this morning, we're going to look at verses 7 through 10 first. That is the issue of life. I don't know if you've ever been conflicted about what you should enjoy in life or not. For many people, they're either enjoying it to its maximum amount, with no rules, no boundaries, and no limits. Or the other group of people are those that are afraid to do anything for fear they'll do something wrong. that nothing should be enjoyed, everything's a grind. I lived and was parented by both groups who looked at life that way. My mother was the eternal pessimist. My father was always an optimist. That's why he farmed. You always hope that A, the ground will dry out, you can get stuff planted, B, the ground will then become wet and grow, and C, the ground will stay dry at harvest time so you can get to harvest it. He was always the eternal optimist, and my mother was exactly the opposite. So I was always conflicted about a view of life, being raised by those extremes, those opposites. But when I come to verses 7 through 10 in the book of Ecclesiastes, and I realize Solomon's talking to an assembled group of people who are there to worship, hence the name Ecclesiastes, which means an assembly. And he's looking back across his life. He's giving us some ups and downs of life, a realistic view of life. And then he comes to verse 7, and here's what he says. He says, "Go then, eat your bread in happiness, and drink your wine with a cheerful heart, for God has already approved your works. Let your clothes be white all the time, and let not oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the woman whom you love all the days of your fleeting life, which he has given to you under the sun." Every woman wants that on her anniversary card. I'm enjoying you while I've got you. Okay? "For this is your reward in life, and in your toil in which you've labored under the sun." There's that favorite phrase of his. Verse 10, "Whatever your hands find to do, do it with all your might, for there's no activity or planning or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol where you are going." He encourages you, and then he tells you in verse 10, go ahead and enjoy life, because guess what's going to happen to you? It's going to end. You're headed to the grave. There's an old song that was written in the 30s entitled "Enjoy Yourself," made popular in the 50s. It says, the chorus says, enjoy yourself while you have time. Everything's in the pink, so you better enjoy yourself while you have time. Now, I've never heard that song, and I only discovered it because one of the guys' commentaries I was reading cited that little ditty chorus line out of that song. Maybe some of you know it. That's great. But it reflects a period of time in our history in America in the 30s when things weren't so good. And the point of the song was simply this: you better enjoy life now, because after that, death comes. What's interesting is that what Solomon says here is also found in the Epic of Gilgamesh, or the Gilgamesh Epic. And you go, what's that? Well, it's one of the earliest pieces of writing that we have in human history. It dates back to the time of Moses, or a little before Moses. And it was written by a Sumerian king. And he details the beginning of time, the creation of everything. He codifies the laws of Mesopotamia, what is now Iraq and Iran. He codifies the laws of the land. And then he writes some poetry. And in one of his poems in the Epic of Gilgamesh is something almost similar to what Solomon writes here in these verses. So down through human history, there's always been this bit of advice that you ought to enjoy life. And there's always been the other side of the scales. And that is, you want to be careful how much of life you enjoy and what you should enjoy. And Solomon looks back across his life, and after talking about the same fate that awaits all of us, good or evil, I think he has a bit of, wait a second, we need some encouragement here. Now, follow along with me, if you will, as I work through the angst of my upbringing in a Christian home, where I had an optimist and a pessimist as parents. A cardinal rule of our existence in my family was this: you don't do anything on Sunday. You don't go out to eat. You don't shop. You can't go swimming at the state park. But you can milk the cows, feed the chickens, pick up the eggs, Men fence if the hogs get out. My dad only went to the field one time on a Sunday. It had rained for a solid week and it finally dried out and it was time to get the crops in. He didn't go to church that Sunday morning. He went out to plow the fields because it was dry and he wanted to make the most of the time. The tractor broke down, and when we got back from church, Dad was in the machine shed fixing the tractor. He came in to eat lunch and he said, I will never miss church again. And he never did. He never turned another piece of dirt on a Sunday. Couldn't go to movies for a long time. A, we didn't have the money, and B, there wasn't anything worth seeing. Only discover later on in my adulthood life that Mom and Dad would go to the cinema occasionally. So you can understand my angst in trying to figure out as a teenager, as a child and a teenager and an adult, what in life is there that I can enjoy besides work? Well, I can enjoy sleep. I can enjoy fresh grown produce. I can enjoy fresh milk. I can enjoy rest after a hard day's work. I can enjoy a bath from getting cleaned up. I can enjoy fried chicken or meatloaf on Sundays. Look forward to Sunday dinner. Fried chicken or meatloaf. Occasionally some steak. And all of a sudden I'm confronted with, as a child being raised in a godly home, how much of life do I get to enjoy? You know, I get into the New Testament and I read in the book of Colossians, there are a group of people running around terrorizing the Christian community. They've got the filthy five, the nasty nine, and the dirty dozen of don'ts. You can't do this, you can't touch that, you can't go there. Yet I read in 1 Timothy 4:4 that everything that's been created by God is good if it's received with thankfulness, gratitude. And then I come to Ecclesiastes chapter, in the book of Ecclesiastes, and I'm thoroughly confused about what he's trying to get at. And then I come to chapter 9 and verse 7, and he goes right back to the top of the roller coaster mountain. He goes right back up. He plunges down into despair and says, you know, we all end up in the same place. And then he takes us right back up the other side of the roller coaster and he says, by the way, we all end up in the same place, but go ahead and enjoy yourself. And I find today there are a lot of people who are confused about whether or not they should enjoy life or not. And by the way, just so you know, in the 1st century A.D., when Paul goes into Athens, he runs into the same problem of the meaning of life with the Greeks. The Epicureans are those who have no rules, no boundaries, and no limits. They enjoy everything in life to the max. There isn't anything they won't do in excess. And then he encounters in the same marketplace the other philosophical pendulum swing of the Stoics. And man, they're on guard for everything. They have no smiles on their faces. They don't enjoy anything at all. For them, it is a moral misgiving to have enjoyment, period. They are the doom and gloom people. They are the people of strict regimens. They make their protein drink in the morning. That's all they have all day. They exercise 6 hours a day. They go to bed every night at a certain time. Their life is nothing but one continuous plan of the avoidance of any kind of pleasure. So how do you live life in a world that contains all of that? It's a good question. Because if you watch around you, you see both extremes, don't you? You see those who enjoy everything in life to its maximum, without rule, boundary, or limit. And you see others who just simply have life metered out. And if you interfere with that regimen, with that discipline, they don't know what to do. So there are two questions from verses 7 through 10 that we're going to ask. First of all, should I enjoy life? Is there anything that is acceptable for me to enjoy? Well, it would seem that there might be, because Solomon says in verse 7, go. Now that's kind of an interesting word there, because it's not a suggestion, it's a command. He says, if you need permission, here it is. Go enjoy. Eat your bread. Drink your wine with a cheerful heart, for God has already approved your works. So the first thing about should I enjoy life is yes. Why? Because on the roller coaster that is the book of Ecclesiastes, and it seems that there are more down verses than there are up verses, and these verses here, 7 through 9, are up verses, encouraging verses. The first reason is that we need to enjoy life because it gives us a balanced perspective. Now I understand why God brings opposites together in marriage. My father complimented my mother complimented my father. The interesting thing is, when all four of us children were alive and adults, we get together and we point the finger and say, you're just like Mom. You're just like Dad. And it was interesting, we were just like both of them. In certain areas, the area of influence. Solomon simply says here, and you want to be very careful. He says, yes, you should enjoy life, because it's going to give you a balanced perspective. With all the pain and agony that the book of Ecclesiastes says befalls human beings, there are also the things of joy that are common to all human beings. So the question, should I enjoy life, is answered, yes. It's going to keep you going in the rough times, isn't it? Dear friend of ours is lying on her deathbed in Harrisonville. It'll be a matter of days, and she will pass into her eternal rest and join her husband and her young son who died in childhood. And she will spend eternity with Jesus Christ. And I know enough of her story to know that her life and her husband's life was filled with great tragedy in the death of a child. But I also know that the balancing point of their life were their other three children who are still alive to this day, their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. What you need to acknowledge, Solomon is telling us here in these verses, is this. There's a balance to life, and it's not accidental. That's the big divergence from your modern-day thinking and the book of Ecclesiastes. Modern-day thinking says that there's a yin and a yang to life. That's Far Eastern philosophical points of view. That's Star Wars mentality. There's good and there's evil in life, and they battle back and forth and balance each other out. The reality simply is, from the book of Ecclesiastes, that there is a balancing part of life, but it is not accidental and it's not impersonal. It doesn't just happen. The second reason you should enjoy life is because of this very passage and what it says. If you read verse 7 carefully, it says, go. That's a command. Don't dilly-dally around. Don't think it's optional to enjoy life. You can enjoy life. Go ahead and do it. He says, eat your bread in happiness, drink your wine with a cheerful heart. Please notice his point of foundation for his statement. For God. See, much of modern thinking simply buys into an impersonal force that controls the yin and yang of life. But for a person who comes to Jesus Christ, the yin and yang of life is not impersonal, it's related to a person, God. And God has given us, and that's why you have in 1 Timothy 4:4, that's why you have Paul telling Timothy as a pastor, listen, don't get caught up with all the myths that are circulating around in 1st century AD Middle East. And there were all kinds of them. There was the influence of the Epicureans, the influence of the Stoics, there was the influence of the Judaizers, those who had a strict adherence to the Mosaic law. He says, don't get caught up in those things. Here's the basic principle. Everything that God has created is to be enjoyed, is good, if it is received with gratitude. Now there's a real danger in that verse, isn't there? Because a lot of people look at that as permission to do whatever they want. Let's look a little closer at what Ecclesiastes tells us about enjoying life. Should I enjoy life? Yes. Why? Because it helps me balance out life. And so as we were in that room with that woman at 88 years of age with her heart failing and on her last days in this world, the agony of death became real as we talked with her son and daughter. And we've known them for many years, godly people, godly children. It doesn't diminish the hurt. It doesn't diminish the agony and the pain. It doesn't diminish the tears. But I'm telling you, as we sit there and talk, we begin to remember things that happened, conversations that took place. And on the way home, my wife remembered the influence of that husband and wife on our lives. And guess what happened? The agony of death and separation and loss is balanced by what? The enjoyment of a memory of life. The difference between the book of Ecclesiastes and modern thinking today is the introduction of a three-letter word, God. It gives us a balanced perspective, and it also helps us understand that in these enjoyment passages in the book of Ecclesiastes, God is at the center of it. I'll give the passages to you where we find the joy that God gives us. Ecclesiastes 2:24, and Ecclesiastes 3:13, and Ecclesiastes 5:20. All three of those passages are little enjoyment passages woven into this otherwise kind of dark and despairing book. But every time he gives us that ray of light, there's one person present in every one of those passages, including here in chapter 9 and verse 7. That's God. That's God. Should I enjoy life? The overwhelming answer is yes. Why? Number one, it gives me a balanced perspective of real living. The second thing it does, it makes me think about who's the cause of the enjoyment of life. It is God. So what should I enjoy? Well, he gives you three things. They are given in the language of the day. He gives you contentment, comfort, and companionship. Here are three things that there is no problem with enjoying in life. Contentment, comfort, and companionship. The first thing he talks about there in verse 7 is the issue of contentment. Eat your bread in happiness and drink your wine with a cheerful heart. Solomon in the book of Proverbs says that a merry heart doeth good like medicine. Do you understand that one of the main functions of wine in Solomon's day was medicinal? Now, don't go overboard on this. Water supplies weren't that great and were contaminated. There are 6 words in the Old Testament for wine. And there's always a cautionary statement when you overdo wine. Solomon says that a fool is a person who lingers too long by the wine. Drunkenness is never condoned. Okay? Paul tells Timothy in 1 Timothy to take a little wine for his stomach's sake. Apparently Timothy had some issues and he needed some medicinal value of wine. The longer you fermented wine, the more toxic it became, the more dangerous it became. But here's the thing. in verse 7, the first thing is that God has provided us with the things that make for contentment. A meal. He says, eat your bread and drink your wine in happiness and with a cheerful heart. Why? Because you recognize where it comes from. One of the major maladies of our world today is it's the fact that we don't acknowledge where our resources come from. It's very easy for a farmer, having been one and raised on a farm, it's very easy for a farmer to look at all of his crops and produce, all of his cattle, and say, well, I did this. I tilled the ground, I planted the seed, and I harvested it. Except that the Word of God tells me a God-centered life looks at it and says, God made the earth, He provides the rain and the sunshine, and He makes things grow that I can't understand how they do grow. I'm simply the person who manages the work that God's already given me to do. Big difference. Contentment. He says, go ahead and enjoy life. Enjoy life. Enjoy the contentment of a meal that God has provided for you. Do it with a cheerful heart, a thankful heart. Again, 1 Timothy 4:4. If it is received with thankfulness, a cheerful heart, contentment. What else should I enjoy? The second thing, as we go on, in verse 8, let your clothes be white all the time. No mother will ever dress her children in white. And if I ever wore a white shirt, I was sure to get one stain on it, no matter what it might be. What's the significance of that? Well, that's comfort. You see, in Solomon's day, white garments were dress-up garments. I was raised on a farm. We never dressed up for meals. But Solomon says you should enjoy life, and one of the things you should enjoy in life is dressing up. Now, we all work in a culture now that has casual Friday, and casual Thursday, and casual Wednesday. We all now live in a culture of pajama pants and sweatpants and shorts and flip-flops and sandals. My middle daughter, if she lived at the Antarctic, would still wear flip-flops. That's her shoe of choice, no matter what the temperature or weather conditions are. That is the enjoyment of life. Here's the point. The point is this. God provides us, first of all, with the contentment of food, and He provides us with the comfort of dress, array. Enjoy yourself. You always find people who are philosophically conflicted because of what they have and what they wear. Oh, well, that's beautiful. Where'd you get it? Oh, I got it on sale. Kmart. Blue light special. I always thought it was interesting at Christmas time, in our early years of marriage, to go buy a fine piece of clothing for my wife. I brought a dress home one time for her Christmas present. She unwrapped it and she looked at it. She started crying and thought she didn't like it. And she said, oh, you should have. I said, why not? Well, it probably cost too much. So? He doesn't say you dress up all the time. He doesn't say that you spend money you don't have. But He does say, in the area of life, enjoy what God has given you. Some people enjoy dressing up and looking like an unmade bed. Other people enjoy dressing up and looking presentable. And I don't care which one you are, the question is, enjoy life. God has given you the ability to provide array for yourself. Contentment and comfort. White garments were the dress-up clothes. If you go on and read in verse 8, and let not oil be lacking on your head. What in the world is that all about? Is that a beauty secret? Could be. But oil in that day was a fragrance. It was always scented. It's the modern equivalent of cologne or perfume. Look good, smell good. Sometimes we are our own worst enemies in the Christian community because we've come to be characterized as people who don't enjoy life. Christians can't do anything. And sometimes that's true. We've given Christianity a bad rap because here he's telling us, enjoy life. It gives you a balanced perspective and God's provided it. Comfort. The white garments were dress-up clothes. The oil is perfume, fragrance. And it's all right to enjoy those things. I've now got my daughters for Christmas presents on the cologne regimen. When one runs out, Christmas comes around, I get another one. Third thing that I should enjoy in life. What can I enjoy? Enjoy life with the woman whom you love all the days of your fleeting life which He's given you under the sun. Contentment, comfort, companionship. Companionship. Here he endorses the enjoyment of marriage and family life. We've all heard the sayings, well, the ball and chain that I have. The man or the woman that God gave me. No, here Solomon simply says, what should I enjoy in life? I should enjoy the contentment God has provided me, the comfort God has provided me, and I should enjoy the companionship God has provided me. Remember, it is God who says, it is not good that man be alone. He made us relational because God is relational. Now, just before we leave this pleasure section in verse 10, he says in verse 10, whatever your hands find to do, do it with all your might. Enjoy life. And that means whatever you're going to do, don't do it half-heartedly. Invest yourself in it. Invest yourself in it. Because there's going to come a day when, in retrospect, you might be saying, well, I wish I'd done that. Well, don't do that. Enjoy life now. Enjoy it. That's why looking at flowers grow now is kind of intriguing to me. Don't care to plant them, don't care to eat them, but they're beautiful. And I'm glad my wife enjoys them. I enjoy sunrises and sunsets a little more. I enjoy the relationships of my children and my wife and other people more now than I did. I'm not so conflicted. Why? Because I know that I can enjoy life. And it's rather liberating. I wonder sometimes how Mother would have lived differently had she decided to enjoy life a little more than be such a pessimist. The most enjoyable thing for her was the day we sold the milk cows. Kid you not? The cows are gone. And then Dad bought some beef cows. Here's the danger of pleasure. Here's what Solomon doesn't say in this passage. Here's where the world takes what Solomon says and goes beyond what Solomon means. Here's the danger of enjoying life. And it's this. that we pursue the gift of contentment and comfort and companionship more than the giver of the gift. There's the danger. And here's what happens. Timothy Keller says it best this way. He says, sin is not just the doing of bad things, but the making of good things into ultimate things. It is seeking to establish a sense of self by making something else more central to your significance, purpose, and happiness than your relationship to God. So in these few verses here about life, Solomon's giving us a warning. He's encouraging us to enjoy life because it gives us balance, and we acknowledge that it comes from God. And then he tells us what we can enjoy. And then he says in verse 10, just remember, life is about this long, and then after that you're not going to enjoy any of it, so invest yourself in life. And then the danger is that we pursue the gift instead of the giver. And what happens? Then we make the gift the God. Then we make food and drink in excess our God, our idol. It leads to excess, which leads to idolatry, which leads to destruction. We make possession, comfort, our God. We never have enough. Seems to be a theme of Ecclesiastes. Or we make companionship the idol. And we aren't satisfied with one, and we move on to the next, and to the next, and to the next, and ultimately we write a song about it that says, love the one you're with. Keller's right, sin is not just the doing of bad things, but the making of good things, which he says enjoy, into ultimate things. It's making food and wine an idol. It's making material things an idol. It's pursuing the gift instead of the giver. Sin is not just the doing of bad things, it's the making of good things into ultimate things. And there's where Ecclesiastes diverges from our modern world. Yes, you should enjoy life, but blowing your brains out on addictive substances and alcohol and the pursuit of food and comfort and contentment, never having enough so that it's your mantra is I owe, so off to work I go, so I can buy, so I can go out and get more. The constant search for meaning and significance in relationships, only to find that there is no perfect human being, so disgruntled and disenchanted, I search somewhere else. We wind up pursuing the gift and not the giver. We turn good things into ultimate things. We look for our significance in what we have, what we own, and who we love, instead of God. There it is, life. Life. The next section of Scripture, I borrowed a line from Chicago's song, Does Anybody Really Know What Time It Is? Because the next section of Scripture simply tells us about this, about time. He says in verse 11, he says, I again saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, and the battle is not to the warriors, and neither is bread to the wise, nor wealth to the discerning, nor favor to men of ability, for time and chance overtake them all. Verse 12, moreover, man does not know his time. There it is. Man does not know his time. Does anybody really know what time it is? Do you really know what's coming down the pike? And is there anything that you can do about it? And what do you need in order to live this life with that kind of ambiguity coming at you, that kind of doubt, that kind of unawareness. What we don't know, verses 11 and 12. Please notice again, his observation is horizontal. I saw again under the sun. He looks out across humanity and he says, this is what I see happening in my world. And he gives you a list of comparisons. He gives you a list of comparisons. He says, the race isn't to the swift. Everybody thinks of the tortoise and the hare, right? The battle is not to the warriors. All you got to do is read the book of Judges, and it's a woman who takes a tent peg and destroys an evil king. Neither is the bread to the wise, nor wealth to the discerning. Doesn't matter how intelligent you are. Doesn't matter how energetic you are. Sometimes the realities of life confound you, don't they? You would think that a person who's wise would make investment and become wealthy. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Nor wealth to the discerning, nor favor to the men of ability. You look at some people and they've just got ability oozing out of their pores. And there's no reason why in the world they shouldn't be making it. And yet they're struggling in life. And then he makes this observation. He says, for time and chance have overtaken them. Here's what we don't know. We don't know the things of life will happen. We don't know the things of life will happen. He says, I saw again under the sun. And he lists several things. And all of them seem to make sense, that the faster person wins the race. But then we see that that's not always true. And we're trying to make sense out of that. And here's a person who has this great insight and ability in investing, and yet they go broke. And this person with great abilities, and yet they squander them away, and they wind up broken and destitute. That phrase at the end of verse 11 is very telling. For time and chance overtake them all. Here's what he sees in life. He says, in life, here's what I've seen. That the people who look like they've got it nailed down are the ones that are going to wind up blowing it. And I can't explain it. A guy by the name of Donald Peters, who lived in Connecticut, and bought a lottery ticket and won one large lottery. A year or two later, he went and bought another lottery ticket, and on the day he bought the lottery ticket and the numbers were drawn, he again won the second lottery ticket. And that evening, he died of a heart attack. The French playwright and theater artist Molière, concluding the final scene of his biography about himself, final song in the third scene, he began to have a coughing spell. He couldn't finish the play, he died. You just don't know when things are going to happen in life, do you? Can't predict them. Can't forecast them. You can do all you can to figure the parameters of possibilities, but you can't predict when it'll happen. That's exactly what he's saying in verse 11. Time and chance happen to us. By the way, it's very interesting to study those two words, time and chance. The word time literally refers to the things of life, the events of life. As we said here this morning, we don't know the next event that's coming to us. As best as we might plan and forecast and work, we really can't predict the next event that's coming at us. I'm sure the people who built their houses on the big island of Hawaii are now looking at the oozing lava and cracks in the ground and the ash in the air and going, maybe it wasn't a good idea to build. Time is the seasons of life. It's the things of life that will happen. Time is the seasons of life. As you go through life, things happen. You can't predict them. At best, you might be able to prepare for them. The word chance, there in verse 11, simply means an event of life. An event of life. Doesn't mean randomness or fate. It means an event of life. In the seasons of life, that's time, events happen. Things happen. Verse 12 kind of gives you a coloring of what he has in mind. Verse 12 says, moreover, a man does not know his time. He doesn't know what's going to happen. Like fish caught in a treacherous net and birds trapped in a snare. You get the idea that the things and events of life, the times and the events of life, are bad things that happen to us. And we don't know when they're coming. He says, but we do know this. We aren't aware of it. We can't do anything about it. We can't stop it. We can't accelerate it. We can't get around it. We can't get over it. We can't get under it. So the sons of men are ensnared at an evil time when it suddenly falls on them. Here's what you don't know. You don't know when this will happen. So what do we need? Verse 13. Also, this I came to see as wisdom under the sun, and it impressed me. And then he does three things. He exemplifies wisdom in verses 13 through 15. He personifies wisdom in verses 16 through 18. And then he applies wisdom. Verse 13, he says, I came to see that what we need in order to prepare for the uncertainty of what we don't know, in verses 11 and 12, is wisdom. And always remember this when you're reading the book of Ecclesiastes. He contrasts the wisdom of man, which he's going to describe for you from verse 12 on through verse 18. But he doesn't get you an answer. Why? Because the purpose of Ecclesiastes is to force you to go somewhere else in the Bible and look for answers. What he's doing, he's looking out across life, and here's what he says. I came to see wisdom under the sun, and it impressed me. There was a small city with a few men in it, and a great king came to it, surrounded it, and constructed large siege works against it. But there was found in it a poor wise man, and he delivered the city by his wisdom. Yet no one remembered that poor man. He exemplifies wisdom this way. You can be as poor as dirt. You can be weak and small. You can be untalented and have no great abilities, but you can do something that nobody else can do because you have wisdom from God. And what's this poor wise man do against this great king and army? He defeats them. And what happens to his legacy? Nobody remembers them. Some people think those two verses pertain to Jesus Christ. It's a rather interesting thought. I'm not sure it does. But boy, wouldn't it be true that our world is surrounded by an enemy king with a great army? And here is the poor wise man, Jesus Christ, born in a stable, in a barn, in a feeding trough, wrapped in grave clothes, who comes to deliver the world. And he does it, and yet no one remembers him. It is an interesting thought. Wisdom exemplified. The next thing he does, verses 16 through 18, is wisdom personified. So I said, and here's how he personifies it. He makes a statement. He draws a contrast. He says, wisdom is better than strength. He takes the little example in verses 14 and 15, and he says, you know, the poor wise man's better than the army and the king. But the wisdom of the poor man is despised, and his words are not heeded. The words of the wise heard in quietness are better than the shouting of a ruler among fools. It's always the person with the bigger voice who winds up getting heard, right? Does that mean it's better advice? Not at all. Sometimes it's better to listen to the person, but you've got to go up. Say that again. Say that again. Then in verse 18, wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. You know what's more powerful than all the nuclear armaments that any country can ever manufacture? The wisdom of God. The wisdom of God. And then he gives you an end to the application of wisdom. He says all it takes is one sinner to mess everything up. By one man, sin entered into the world. And everybody else bears the DNA of that man. We are all sinners. We are all sinners. So what do we need? First of all, we need to know Jesus. We need to surrender our life to Him. Why? Because Paul tells the Corinthians in chapter 1 of 1 Corinthians that Jesus Christ is our wisdom. You know how a Christian enjoys life differently from the rest of the world, although we enjoy the same things, food and comfort and contentment and companionship? You know what makes the distinctive difference in the way we enjoy life? Jesus Christ. Second thing we need to know about wisdom is that we ought to be thankful. When all the events of life come raining down upon us, and it seems like there's no end of it, remember the words of Solomon in verse 7. Go, eat your bread, and drink your wine with happiness, with a cheerful heart. Be thankful. 1 Timothy 4:4. Everything created by God is to be enjoyed. It is good if it is received with what? Thankfulness. Wisdom tells me that even in the bad times I can be thankful because they don't endure forever. Eternity is a lot different than the here and now. And even in the here and now, guess what? I can be thankful for the good things I enjoy. Why? Because they come from the hand of God. And He gives them to me. Be content. Be content. The world, the mantra of the world is discontentment. The world is never satisfied with what it's got. It always wants something else. It's interesting. There in 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 3, Paul told Timothy, contentment with godliness is great gain, and it's profitable for all things. Be content. Be prayerful. When life comes raining down upon us, God's wisdom tells us we've got somebody we can go to. Be prayerful. Jesus taught His disciples to pray. We use prayer like a bilge pump on a boat when we get in a bind. No. Pray without ceasing. Why? Because life is a constant up and down roller coaster ride. So get ready. Prepare yourself. Be humble. Be humble. The rich farmer in the book of Luke, bumper crop, had to build more granaries to store the grain in. He got done with the harvest, he sat down, he looked out across those fields already harvested, he said, see what I've done. Oh, you fool. You didn't do it, God. Be generous. There's always an opportunity to help, to extend the helping arm. Be generous. Be faithful. Even in the rough times, wisdom tells us that God is faithful. Model His faithfulness. Be hopeful. By the time you get done with verse 18, you're kind of going, okay, I kind of understand that God gives me the permission to enjoy what He's provided for me. Contentment, comfort, and companionship. And I can't make the gift more important than the one who's given it to me. I understand that. It gives me balance in life. It helps me deal with the realities of life, the pain of life, the fact that there seems to be inequities and injustice everywhere. It helps me understand those things. And ultimately, it forces me to go outside the book of Ecclesiastes and find a hope that is eternal, that will not change, that is guaranteed by the giver of these great gifts. Be hopeful. My confidence isn't in the discoveries of man under the sun. His knowledge is limited, his abilities are limited, his ability to see the future is limited. My confidence is the one who holds the future, who has decreed the future, and who will make the future come to pass. I love the words of Jesus to His disciples there on that final eve at the Lord's table. In my Father's house are many mansions. And if it were not so, I would have told you. And if I go away, I will come. Be hopeful. My confidence is in God, not in the ability he's a man under the sun. Let's pray. Father, you love us, so much so that you gave us the ultimate gift in Jesus Christ. And he's the only one that can make sense out of our life. He's the only one that out of pain can bring joy. Out of destruction and decay bring hope. And out of an instrument of death bring life. We can either live life our way and be constantly frustrated, or we can live life under the auspices of our Savior and make sense of it. But we can only do that when we surrender to Jesus Christ. So this morning, Lord, I pray if there's a heart struggling with the issues of life, who's not yet turned to you, to trust you implicitly and explicitly with all of their life, that they would gently, humbly seek you and surrender the war of self-will. For those of us who follow you, what encouragement and joy you give us. Because we ultimately know that everything that we enjoy in life is a direct result, a direct gift from your hand. Thank you for those enjoyments, those pleasures that we can have from you. And the greatest pleasure that we can enjoy is your Son, Jesus Christ. Because you, Father, said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." May we find our pleasure in what brings the Father pleasure, His Son. In Jesus' name we pray. I'll be here afterwards. If you have questions,